In 2019, Margaret Atwood wrote the true ending of Gilead. 34 years later, Hulu's series still hasn't adapted it. It left us believing the resistance was a symbol of hope when, in reality, it was an act of sabotage from within. Because Aunt Lydia, the woman many viewers hated most, is the one holding the files that could bring down the commanders. Today, we're summarizing The Testaments. We'll reveal how she leaked that dossier, who the two young women were who crossed the border, and why the real ending is colder and far more definitive than the one shown on television. The full story begins now. The statue of Aunt Lydia towers over the entrance to Ardua Hall, the secluded complex where the young women who help run the regime are trained and educated. The stone figure portrays her as young, upright, and unwavering. But the real woman hides a secret that could shatter the foundations of Gilead before its downfall. She had once served as a family court judge and firmly believed in the laws of a country that no longer existed. Her life revolved around civil rulings and custody cases. It was an orderly world she took for granted. That world collapsed in a single dawn when a theocratic sect seized Congress and froze the bank accounts of every woman, stripping them of access to their money and the legal protections they had always relied on. She realized that survival required more than principles. It required knowledge and adaptation. Armed men stormed her office carrying lists and rifles. They separated the women from their colleagues and locked them inside a stadium under the blazing sun. They were surrounded by soldiers, patrol officers, and agents of the new regime, all quietly monitoring their every move. Open resistance was useless, so she accepted that conventional morality was dead and that only cold strategy would keep her alive. She was forced to witness an execution and handed a rifle. Pulling the trigger was the only way to avoid becoming the next victim. So she fired, and the guilt settled in her chest like an immovable weight. She was then transferred to an isolation cell known as the gratitude tank. There, she was deprived of light, human contact, and any sense of time, as they tried to break her identity through cold and absolute silence. But Lydia did not surrender. Instead, she learned to stay quiet, to observe her guards' routines, and to understand that in this new world, information was worth more than blind loyalty. Commander Judd offered her a way out. He was the head of the secret police, the kind of man whose wives had a habit of disappearing under conveniently mysterious circumstances. He wasn't looking for loyalty. He was looking for tools. Lydia accepted without hesitation, knowing she needed time to build a network of protection from within. She became a respected instructor. She designed uniforms, wrote hymns, and helped structure the system of control over women. But in secret, she began documenting every act of corruption, every abuse, and every crime committed by the leaders, gathering evidence as the regime expanded. She remained calm while other aunts, Vidala, Elizabeth, and Helena, competed for power. She knew the only way to win was to let them expose themselves. While she carefully stored every piece of evidence in the archives of Ardua Hall, far away from there, Agnes grew up within the walls of Gilead, convinced that the wife of a high-ranking official was her real mother. In that system, commanders' wives occupied the second highest female rank, dressed in blue and granted limited domestic authority. But they remained entirely dependent on their husbands and the rigid hierarchies of the state. She spent her afternoons building a perfect little world around her dollhouse, unaware that the state was already erasing identities and binding women to names that were not their own. To the young girl, that house was a safe haven, a bubble she believed would last forever. The illness of her adoptive mother shattered the illusion. The whispers in the kitchen and the evasive looks from the adults weighed on her like stones. One day, during recess, a schoolmate blurted out the truth. Her biological mother had been a forced breeder, a handmaid dressed in red, compelled to bear children for the elite. She had been torn away from her daughter and forced to give her up in order to save the girl from an uncertain fate. The ground seemed to tilt beneath her feet. She sought comfort from the household cook, who cautiously confirmed the story as grief began carving its way through her heart. The arrival of a new handmaid marked a turning point. The household was expecting a child. The official's new wife took control, and Agnes became invisible. She watched the young woman with a mixture of hope and fear, secretly searching her room and finding nothing but red clothing, and a silence that concealed an entire life. The birth ended in tragedy. The handmaid did not survive, but the baby did. Her stepmother claimed the child as her own, and Agnes realized that the system consumed the weak without mercy. She decided she would not become another victim. The family dentist, Dr. Grove, a man respected by the elite who preyed on young girls under the protection of his professional status and the regime's silent complicity, crossed a line during an appointment. She understood then that girls had no voice, and she buried the silence like an internal wound, one that permanently destroyed her trust in adults. When her stepmother announced her engagement to the head of the secret police, time ran out. Agnes knew that marriage to Judd would not bring protection, only a life of submission and constant danger in a circle where wives mysteriously disappeared. She remembered a friend who had injured herself to avoid marriage. Determined not to marry, she sought out a kind instructor and cried at her desk. Resistance had to begin immediately, or she would die in silence. Aunt Lydia visited her in secret and offered her refuge at Ardua Hall. Agnes accepted. She staged a breakdown to escape her stepmother's plans and crossed the threshold into a forbidden place. There, she met another young woman in seclusion, who was also fleeing a forced marriage. Her name was Becka, and she was Dr. Grove's own daughter. She had slashed her wrist with pruning shears to escape the altar and was now seeking to dedicate her life to the service of the aunts rather than be handed over to a husband. Together, they began deciphering letters that looked like insects crawling across the page, discovering that reading could unlock doors that had always been closed. Every book became an act of silent rebellion. One day, lineage records appeared on Agnes's desk. They were confidential documents deliberately left there by Lydia. Secret files tracing real parentage, affairs, and forbidden unions. These records kept real power hidden from the leaders while serving as a form of insurance for the aunts. Agnes read about poisonings, rigged trials, and deep-rooted corruption. She realized that corruption was the foundation of Gilead itself and decided to use that knowledge. The loyalty she had once pledged changed direction forever. Meanwhile, in Toronto, Nicole was growing up under a different name. Her adoptive parents protected her with extreme care while running a second-hand clothing store, unaware that she was the baby who had been rescued years earlier. When her biological mother escaped the regime after the coup, everything changed. The turning point came on Nicole's birthday. An explosion destroyed the store and took the lives of her parents. Behind the attack were the eyes, carrying out a tactical operation to eliminate resistance cells that had been active in the city for years. Before Nicole could even process what had happened, a resistance operative emerged through the smoke. She wore no badge or uniform, only the confidence of someone who had been doing this for a very long time. At her side was Elijah, a veteran of the underground network whose weathered hands had crossed countless borders. He revealed the truth. She was baby Nicole. Mayday had protected her ever since she was smuggled out of Gilead as an infant. Mayday was no ordinary organization. It was a network of spies, smugglers, and defectors operating in the shadows. Its mission was simple: rescue the persecuted and undermine the regime at every opportunity. At first, Nicole rejected the idea, but the people around her forced her to face reality. The mission began. Her training was intense and relentless. One instructor taught her how to fight. Ada taught her how to pray like a true believer. They even tattooed a symbol on her arm, concealing a microscopic photograph of confidential documents beneath it, information that could only be read with a specialized magnifying device. Nicole also learned how to lie naturally, turning fear into fuel. She crossed the border under the alias of a novice missionary, joining Gilead's official missionary program. These missionaries traveled abroad to recruit converts and, often without realizing it, served as intelligence couriers for the regime. Nicole used that role as the perfect cover, allowing her to enter Gilead without raising suspicion and with the protection of diplomatic access. She was greeted with hymns and cold smiles. Ardua Hall swallowed her whole almost immediately. She kept her eyes lowered. She missed freedom and knew she would have to act soon. From the shadows, Aunt Lydia watched carefully. She noticed Nicole's nervousness and offered advice, which Nicole accepted with feigned gratitude, realizing that the elderly woman was playing a far larger game. Then came the day Agnes and Nicole saw each other for the first time. The resemblance in their eyes was impossible to ignore. They cautiously reached for each other's hands, aware that their connection was dangerous, and silently agreed to protect one another. Soon afterward, Aunt Lydia summoned them both to her office and revealed the truth. They were sisters. She showed them the records proving their shared bloodline and laid out the reality of the situation. The regime was already beginning to crack, but it still needed one decisive blow to bring its leadership down from within. Lydia also showed them the escape plan. They had to get the evidence to Canada before the head of the secret police grew suspicious and forced them into a televised wedding, using Nicole as a trophy. Judd needed baby Nicole to legitimize his power on the world stage and strengthen his control at home. A public marriage would be his ultimate victory and his shield against the purges he knew were coming. Time was running out. They decided to trust the old woman. The night of their departure was filled with tension. Agnes packed in the darkness while Nicole checked her backpack, knowing that the friend they were leaving behind would not be joining them. Becka had chosen to stay and delay the pursuit. She planned to hide inside the building's water cistern, fully aware that her sacrifice would be the price of their freedom. The weight of that sacrifice sat heavily on their hearts, but loyalty guided them toward the door. A fanatical instructor intercepted them in the hallway. It was Aunt Vidala. Her rivalry with Lydia was no secret. But that morning she saw a clear opportunity. She had discovered them during her routine rounds and would not hesitate to turn them in. Capturing 2 fugitives would be her ticket to a higher position in the hierarchy. Nicole struck first with a hard punch. The supervisor collapsed, and they dragged her body behind the statue before sprinting toward a black car. The journey to freedom had begun, their hearts pounding in their chests. The driver asked no questions and took them along back roads. Agnes stared out at the empty fields, while Nicole counted the passing miles, sharing a comfortable silence as trust continued to grow. The coastal route was dangerous. Security checkpoints became increasingly strict. Eventually, the driver dropped them at an abandoned dock where a small boat waited in the fog. The water was cold and unforgiving. The inflatable boat rocked violently in the waves. Nicole struggled to repair the failing motor, while the cold sank deep into their bones. They rode against the current, feeling their strength fade as the distant shoreline lights shimmered like an unreachable mirage. A massive wave slammed them against the rocks. They were thrown into the freezing water and crawled toward shore with numb hands. As they reached land, bright lights surrounded them. It was Ada and Elijah. They wore no uniforms, but their hands carried the weight of years spent coordinating crossings from the other side. They had kept hope alive when everything seemed lost. Now it was time to finish the mission. They had survived, but the mission was not over yet. They woke up together in a hospital and found their biological mother sitting beside them. They recognized her instantly, from her eyes, her presence, and something deeper than memory. The 3 of them cried quietly without saying a word. The evidence they delivered had already thrown Gilead into chaos. The microfilm documents exposed the crimes of the ruling elite, poisonings, illegal executions, and power struggles hidden behind closed doors. The information spread through the international press and even through channels inside the regime itself. The leaders began turning on one another as the system started collapsing from within. History was moving forward with no way back. The regime that had oppressed millions was losing its foundation as its own crimes were exposed, and ordinary people quietly rose against it. Cities erupted in coordinated uprisings. Armies split between competing loyalties. The theocratic structure crumbled beneath the weight of its own corruption and the public revelation of its darkest secrets. Aunt Lydia awaited her final fate. She knew the other aunts would turn against her. She knew the eyes would eventually come for her because of her treason, and that her only remaining choice was to control the ending of her own story before torture or execution stole the last word from her. So she took one final dose of morphine. She hid her manuscript inside a forbidden book and closed her eyes. Her journey ended there, but her struggle continued through the pages she had written. Years later, scholars discovered the documents and pieced together the voices of the 3 women. They realized that history is often written in the shadows. They moved Lydia's statue to Boston and ensured that the sisters lived on to help rebuild a free society, restore democracy, and return to women the rights that the regime had stolen from them. And that is how memory outlived the regime that tried to erase it. Let us know in the comments which unfinished ending you'd like to see covered next on the channel. And remember, if you enjoy this kind of content, the best way to support us is by leaving a like and subscribing. We'll see you in the next video.